Aleksandre Topuria made his UFC debut at UFC 312 in Australia, and he looks like he is going to be a problem for the bantamweight division. He looked just like his brother in that octagon. The boxing's very similar. I thought he had very good boxing. I thought he had very good defense. His head movement was terrific. I thought he mixed in the wrestling pretty well. The suplex at the end of round one was pretty cool. Kind of the highlight of the fight. And he looked very good, very accurate with his shots, very composed and calm in the octagon. Looked like he was very experienced, even though he hasn't fought in 2 years and doesn't have as many fights as his younger brother. He looked very good in there for someone making his UFC debut. Now, I think the thing is he didn't necessarily let his hands go the way his brother does. Didn't take any risks. Despite looking like he probably could have pushed the pace and gotten the knockout, he didn't. And that's okay. 3 rounds was probably more beneficial to him making his UFC debut and not fighting in 2 years. But he looked very good against Colby Thickness, who I thought also looked like he was a very good fighter and deserved a UFC contract. He reminded me a lot of Volk. His movement was really good. He was really slick. He was really, difficult to hit at times. Very fast. Those kicks to the body were they were pretty good. Topuria blocked a lot of those, just like his brother. Very good defense. But I think he's going to be a problem in the UFC's bantamweight division. Now, Henry Cejudo wasn't particularly impressed. Following his performance, he tweeted out, "Biggest favorite on the card and fought with zero intensity. Not too impressed by Aleksandre Topuria in his UFC debut." I mean, he didn't necessarily fight with the same intensity as we've seen his brother fight with against Max Holloway, Volkanovski, Josh Emmett. But again, he hasn't been in the octagon in 2 years. It was probably more beneficial for him to be that composed, not take those risks. This was a big moment for him. And I thought he delivered. I thought his boxing was fantastic. I know I've said this several times already in such a short span, but I can't stress enough how much I think that the Poirier brothers' boxing is honestly, I think, the best in the UFC. And he looked just like his brother Ilya in there, who I believe is the best boxer we've ever seen in the UFC from a technical standpoint. And I think the older brother looks the exact same. And I think these guys have the ability to become UFC champions at the same time. I think Ilya will be the lightweight champion one day, whether he fights Islam Makhachev or not, and whether that fight happens soon or not. I think he's realistically talented enough to become a lightweight champion and to be a double champion, and I think it's going to happen in short order. Especially if Islam Makhachev moves up, I don't think there's going to be anybody else I would favor more to win that belt than Ilya Topuria. Now, the bantamweight division right now has Merab Dvalishvili as their champion. Merab Dvalishvili is a fantastic fighter, but he's a little bit older than these guys. He's about 34 years old, Merab, and he's a fellow countryman. He was in Aleksandre Topuria's corner. These guys aren't going to fight necessarily, but if Merab moves up and Merab retires, I think Aleksandre Topuria is a perfect candidate to become the next bantamweight champion. That's a really good division. And following his fight, he went on the Ariel Helwani show this week, like many fighters do. It is the top MMA show there is. And he said that he's willing to fight Henry Cejudo, who did criticize him, who is a former champion, former double champion, one of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest wrestlers we've ever seen in the UFC. Really good fighter, Henry Cejudo. He's not in his prime anymore, but he's still a really effective fighter. And if he wins in his fight in March, that's an interesting fight for Henry Cejudo to take. Now, Topuria getting pushed that much into, the top 10 so quickly, I think would be a little shocking. I don't think it would happen, but I do think he can fight these ranked guys very soon. I think if he's active this year, I would really like to see him a little more active than his brother right now, considering that he's making his way up to be a champion, had that layoff. I think it'd be good for him to fight again in the summer and again later this year, get 3 fights under his belt in 2025, get in the rankings for the bantamweight division and move his way up. I think the wrestling looked very good. I think, he really controlled him in that third round. And, just that boxing, wrestling, combination, I think, is going to be pose a lot of problems for Topuria's opponents. He is a very well-versed mixed martial artist. I think he looked like he was more comfortable in grappling than his younger brother, who I think Ely is probably more comfortable in the boxing areas. But Aleksandre Topuria, again, that head movement I thought was on point. It was fantastic. We don't see a lot of UFC fighters particularly have those kind of instincts in terms of their boxing ability. And I think he looked like he could be a professional boxer. And I don't really value or hold a lot of MMA fighters boxing in particularly high regard. As someone who grew up more of a fan of boxing than, you at MMA, it's not something that I hold particularly in high regard, the mixed martial artist boxing ability. I think we've seen that with these, kind of gimmick fights with Jake Paul that, Nate Diaz, Tyron Woodley has had. I don't think they are particularly great boxers, these guys. And, that's okay. They don't have to be. I think Dustin Poirier is a pretty good boxer. I think Max Holloway is a very good boxer. I think Alex Pereira is a very, very good boxer as well. And then it's the Topuria brothers, I think. Sean O'Malley's pretty fast. He's pretty slick. But again, I think those are some of the boxers that you would consider the best in the UFC. And I think Aleksandre Topuria in just one fight, I think what I saw from his boxing, I think he's going to be one of the best boxers in the UFC. So I think these guys are going to both be UFC champions at the same time. I think Aleksandre Topuria is that good. I just think activity is the key for him moving forward to be a championship caliber fighter in the UFC. Let me know what you guys think of Aleksandre Topuria in the comments below, whether he could be a champion like his brother. And, be sure to like and subscribe to the Interim Title Show. And thank you again for watching.